Sierra Blanca range, where Mount Huascaran stands tall, perpetually covered in white snow. Water from here flows down, nourishing the surrounding lands, making this one of the greenest areas in Peru. However, behind that hopeful green lies a terrifying tragedy. That swept away people, roads, houses, even entire villages into the vast ocean, all in an instant. What truly happened in this South American country 55 years ago? How did this nation experience such a shocking event? Welcome to the Huascaran Avalanche disaster in Peru. In 1970, 25,000 people lost their lives. 3 million homes were swept away on Khánh Hà TV. And before we get into the main content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our latest content. Now, let's get started right away. In the 1960s, Huascaran not only attracted mountain climbing enthusiasts, but was also home to many indigenous farmers. Dozens of villages, hundreds of farms scattered along the mountainside, formed a community of tens of thousands of people connected to this land. The name Huascaran that we know today is actually just one of many names that have been used for this mountain. Indigenous people have various different names for it. One of them was Matararu, or Matararu, meaning twin snow peaks. Because in reality, this isn't just one mountain, but two peaks joined together. Like its name, there are many stories around Huascaran. Legends passed down orally through generations. Some say this mountain is the embodiment of two lovers who were forbidden to be together. The young man's father cursed them, but eventually a compassionate God helped the young couple reunite, and they stayed together forever in the form of this mountain. Another legend suggests Huascaran is a protective spirit that guards this land and its people. Looking at the fertile fields nourished by water from the mountain, it's not hard to understand why people revered it so much. Huascaran has two main peaks. The southern peak, Huascaran Sur at 6,768 meters, and the northern peak, Huascaran Norte, slightly lower but still reaching 6,654 meters. Interestingly, although not the world's highest mountain, Huascaran is one of the points farthest from Earth's center. Because it's located near the equator, where the planet bulges due to rotation, this peak is actually farther from Earth's core than most other places. There's only one point farther away, which is an area not far to the north, on Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador. But like many other natural wonders, Huascaran provides water and life for many people. But hidden behind that beauty is a frightening dark side. Not Everest, not K2. But Huascaran is actually the mountain that has caused the most deaths in history. The number of people who have died here is even more than the 100 most dangerous mountains in the world combined. For those who want to conquer Huascaran, the journey could last an entire week. The biggest challenge is the giant crevasses in the ice sheets covering the mountain's surface. They change with the seasons, can be dozens of meters wide but still very dangerous. Small cracks, hidden under thick snow, ready to swallow anyone who is careless. Therefore, climbers not only need to be careful, but also must be prepared to face surprises from the changing terrain. Huascaran is extremely steep in many areas, because it is not only the highest peak in the region, but also located at the coastal edge of the mountain range, so it receives a huge amount of water each year. Most of this water freezes, forming massive ice sheets clinging to the mountainside. The amount of ice on Huascaran is so great, they don't have names but are numbered for easy tracking. And then on January 10, 1962, one of those numbered ice masses shocked the world. Glacier 511 had rested on Huascaran's slope for many years, growing heavier as snow accumulated, and climbers walked on it. Beneath that ice layer, seemingly harmless water was silently seeping through, waiting for the right moment to act. Each day when the sun rises, sunlight melts the ice on Glacier 511 bit by bit. Water seeps through cracks, carving small tunnels inside, making the ice mass increasingly weaker. However, when snow falls, it covers the outer ice layer, gradually compacting and pushing the water streams deeper. Over time like this, inside the ice mass gradually becomes a complex network of small cracks, until one day, the weight exceeded the limit. About 10 million cubic meters of ice and rock broke away from the mountainside. A massive chunk plunged down like a freezing wave, sweeping away everything in its path. In just 4 minutes, The terrible ice avalanche moved over 16 kilometers, leveling 9 villages before burying the town of Huascaran. 4,000 people perished in an instant. People in the nearby town of Yungay could only watch helplessly. They were lucky to survive thanks to a large hill blocking the town in the ice avalanche. But, for those with no protection, the chance of survival was almost zero. If not standing at the edge of town and running in the opposite direction from the south, they couldn't do anything but witness the disaster approaching. On the small hill south of Yungay, there is the clearest evidence of the strange luck that helped the town escape. That hill is the burial ground of local people, with a statue of Christ with outstretched, looking down upon the valley. The lower steps were meticulously constructed, carved from fired bricks and modern stone. But in reality, this hill is much older than that. Fresh flower bouquets and tombstones engraved with Spanish text bear witness to approximately 400 generations of humans spanning over 10,000 years. In fact, this is not a natural hill, but rather a legacy of the inhabitants who once lived here, even before writing appeared in the world. And it still stands there, witnessing an entire town disappear in 1962. These are not just ordinary avalanches, but also involve ice and rocks, creating devastating destruction. The Andes in Peru, situated between the Pacific Ocean and the Amazon rainforest, is an ideal place for accumulating millions of tons of ice. But that very fact makes this region a land of unpredictable disasters, typically every decade. This area experiences a major ice avalanche. Fortunately, most occur in remote regions, with no residents, not even anyone to witness them. But that's not always the case. The 1962 ice avalanche was completely different. It drew the world's attention. 4,000 deaths was a horrifying number, even for an avalanche disaster. Therefore, in September of that year, 2 geologists came to Peru to investigate what had happened. David Bernays and Chuck Schumacher were funded by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology (MIT) with the mission to assess the cause of the ice avalanche and determine if this area was still dangerous. But strangely, they discovered something much more frightening. Another ice avalanche, 3 times larger, was waiting to happen. However, not everyone believed them. For many, the disaster seemed to be over. A massive ice block as large as 10 Empire State Buildings had collapsed, nearly wiping out an entire mountainside. Normally, it takes decades for ice to accumulate enough for another avalanche. And skepticism grew even more when these warnings came from American scientists, rather than local researchers. At that time, the political situation in South America was tough. American intervention in many countries in the region had nearly eroded trust in Americans. The local authorities quickly got involved. They sent one of their investigators to re-examine. The final conclusion was announced to the public that the 2 American scientists had made a hasty judgment, lacked information, and there was nothing to worry about. After that, anyone who spoke up to warn about the danger in Trunkay was considered a panic monger. Some people were even threatened with imprisonment for disturbing public order. The 2 geologists, David Bernays and Chuck Schumacher, also could not escape this situation. They were threatened with arrest by the authorities, forced to leave Peru and return to the United States. So Trunkay returned to its peaceful days, as if nothing had ever happened. Ironically, since the 1940s, the Peruvian government had tried to establish a danger zone, prohibiting construction and even wanting to relocate residents away from high-risk areas. However, this plan always faced fierce opposition from local authorities and residents, and so they continued to live as if there was nothing to worry about. The people understood that this mountain was dangerous, but the fertile land here had sustained them for generations. They accepted the risk simply because they did not want to leave their home. For the local authorities, the exposed dangerous assets were much more frightening. It could even be said that the 1962 ice avalanche, although terrifying, ended up being like child's play. No one knew the danger was still there. It turned out that when Bernays and Schumacher surveyed the area, they discovered something alarming near the foot of the mountain. The giant ice mass that had once devastated did not simply slide down. It had cut across the mountainside at an oblique for millions of years. This ice stream had been silently eroding the mountain, like when you chop down a tree and make a V-shaped cut at the base to make it fall. And this cut created a terrifying problem. The entire mountain face was not ice, but solid granite that was precariously perched with nothing supporting it underneath anymore. It was just waiting for a final push. Unfortunately, the authorities made talking about it a crime. Then, as the years passed, the danger that the two American scientists mentioned had faded into oblivion. People were no longer concerned about it now. Even the final warnings were gone. Until May 31st, 1970. At 3:23 p.m., the Avalanche earthquake struck, plunging the entire country of Peru into its darkest historic. The earthquake measured 7.9 on the moment magnitude scale, a more modern and accurate version of the Richter scale, with its epicenter located 35 kilometers off the coast, right in front of Cape Young and Huascaran. In the blink of an eye, power poles toppled chaotically, roads cracked open, the water supply system burst, and the entire coastal infrastructure was completely paralyzed. The largest city in the area, Chile, with over 3 million residents, was located very close to it. Within minutes, streets turned into piles of rubble. Houses collapsed en masse. Over 80% of the city's structures were destroyed. The damage spread so widely that buildings as far as Ecuador were also cracked. The Pan-American Highway, the vital artery connecting the country to the world, was also severely damaged, making international aid access extremely difficult. But all of that was still not the worst. In Yangon, people didn't even have a few minutes to react. The granite face of the mountain could no longer hold on. It broke apart with a terrifying explosion. People later recounted that the sound rang out like a gunshot right next to their ears. Approximately 25 million cubic, nearly 1 kilometer wide, completely detached from the mountainside. That massive rock was so large that even today, if viewed from satellite images, you can still see one side of Huascaran cut perfectly flat, as if someone had sliced off part of the mountain with a knife. That giant rock plummeted straight down, free falling over half a kilometer before crashing violently into Glacier 511. The ice had been silently accumulating for the past 8 years. At this moment, the granite rock was no different from the blade of a giant bulldozer. It plunged deep into the ice, soil, and trees on the mountainside, sweeping along groundwater mud and shattered ice fragments. In an instant, a massive mud wall formed, filled with enormous rocks, sharp ice chunks, and all sorts of chaotic materials. This monster was not just 3 times larger than what Bernier and Schroeder had warned. It was 10 times larger. The vibration was so strong that everything loose on the mountain shattered and plummeted down simultaneously. A massive landslide of ice, rock, and earth, with a size equal to 100 Empire State Buildings, began plunging, heading straight for Trancay, with an average speed of 300 kilometers per hour, even reaching a maximum speed of up to 475 kilometers per hour. No one below had a chance of survival. Compared to the first avalanche, this one was even more devastating. Trancay, the town that once watched Rangahica get wiped out 8 years ago, now found itself equally helpless. They could only witness the massive wall of mud and rocks surmounting the hill that once protected them, then burying the entire town in just seconds. That very hill was also the reason most residents didn't see the disaster coming. TC Huascaran, so they couldn't. When the earthquake struck, many ran into churches, schools, larger buildings, hoping to find safe shelter. But they didn't know that moments later, the landslide would swallow everything. Rangahica, the town rebuilt after the previous disaster with 1,800 residents, vanished in an instant. The mud dragon didn't stop there. It sharply turned right, sweeping along the Valley River, continuing to devastate villages for over 150 kilometers. It even passed over the Carmen del Palo hydroelectric dam, destroying everything. Finally, it emptied straight into the Pacific Ocean, carrying thousands of people who would never be found again. The rare survivors in Trancay, who were fortunate to be outside the destructive flow, recounted that this mudslide was so enormous and powerful that the wind force it pushed ahead alone was enough to knock down houses. The largest rock carried along eventually stopped near Bernier, weighed up to 14,000 tons, equal to the weight of a medium-sized cargo ship. When the dirt and mud began to settle, the entire country fell into chaos. Due to destroyed transportation routes, rescue efforts were delayed for weeks. During that time, thousands of injured had to fend for themselves. Many small communities in remote areas could only be reached by helicopter. Ultimately, only about 400 people survived in Trancay, mainly belonging to 2 main groups. The first group was 300 children, all watching a private performance when the disaster struck. One of the performers, who luckily realized what was happening, led the children to higher ground before the mud flows swept through. The remaining group of 92 people found their final refuge in the cemetery. With nowhere else to run, they rushed up the burial mound, climbed the steps, and huddled around the wall at the top, nestling in the niches where ancestors rested. When the massive mud wall arrived, the hill and its ridge stretching for kilometers in the direction of the avalanche split the flow in two, causing most of the mud wave to divert to the sides. But even so, most of the stone structures still crumbled after the earthquake. Yet a miracle occurred. Despite heavy damage, the Christ the Savior wall remained standing. Villages to the north, south, east, and west of the cemetery were wiped clean without a trace. The scene then was no different from a mountain of corpses that had split the Great Deluge. Like a strange intersection of past and present, life and death, between humanity and the history that hill had preserved for centuries. The rest of Trank Hay was buried under a 5-meter thick layer of mud. Prahica, once rebuilt after the first avalanche, was now buried deep underground. Ultimately, they had to decide to abandon the search for surviving victims. Trank Hay was never excavated. It became an extension of the burial mound to the south, a giant cemetery that no one could relocate. The Huascaran Avalanche buried 15 kilometers of land completely, thereby setting the record as the deadliest avalanche in history. But the exact casualty count remains unknown because the number of missing was too large. In an area too vast and remote, estimates range from 15,000 to 25,000 people for the avalanche and mudslide alone. If including the earthquake, the death toll rises to 66,000 to 70,000 people, with 50,000 people severely injured and over 3 million people losing their homes, mainly in major cities. Nevertheless, the town did not disappear. A new town was built in the following decades, on the foundation of a refugee camp. This time it was located further north, behind a much higher hill than the one that once protected the old city. Despite having endured all the horrific losses, those whose homeland was here still did not want to leave. The streets of the old city remained, but now they only lead to parks and memorials. The cemetery was also rebuilt, meticulously detailed, becoming a symbol, both to commemorate the victims of the tragedy and to honor the place that saved the last people of the town. Where Rohica was also reconstructed, set further back behind a large hill, but it could never return to its former scale. Among the 300 children who survived that day, almost all lost their families. They were sent all over South America, and even further, either to live with relatives or be adopted. So that when they grew up, they were separated from the homeland they should have belonged to. After the disaster, the government finally took decisive action, significantly increasing the resources allocated for avalanche and disaster. By 2000, Peru officially designated May 31st as National Disaster Education and Awareness Day. Now on this day, schools across the country conduct earthquake drills, teaching about disaster prevention so that the next generation is best prepared for the unexpected. What do you think about this tragedy? Would there have been a different outcome if the Peruvian government had trusted the two geologists David Bernays and George Schroer? Please leave your thoughts below and comment to let Khánh Hà know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Khánh Hà TV channel so you don't. For now, goodbye and see you in the next content.
If the veil stirred, subscribe and meet the next encounter.